was talking about some tips about phone photography, and now we're at cell phone photography attachments. One of these attachments includes a macro lens, Photo Jojo works with all phone brands, Clips, Squid Cam, Easy Macro, others. So I guess you can give them a look up. Alright, so we have fisheye lenses. Sometimes see some photos, it look like a ball. It kind of look obscured, some ball type view. That's the fisheye lens. You have a telephoto lens. A telephoto lens is the lens that you use to zoom like way out. Or it's like you're doing some spy stuff, you know. You get that lens, you attach it to your phone, it sticks out, you can zoom far. It really improves your phone lens. You have the polarizers, lens filters. Lens filters, they can change like the colors of your lens. Yeah, a lot of stuff, because they're even like tripods for your phones, and you have gimbals for your phones. That's a little thing you attach to your phone to do video and it moves, stabilize your phone, stuff like those. All right, and then we're at phone photography apps. Alright, a few suggestions. As I told you before, I use Snapseed, Lightroom, but there are some more of them. Alright, your phone cameras app, some of them come equipped with some editing, basic editing. Alright, so you have now, for taking your photos, you have a phone camera. You have Camera Plus, Instagram, Hipstamatic, Camera, well, I don't know this one, and many others. And for editing now, you have Camera Plus, recently new and improved, Snapseed, which is my favorite, Photogene 2, and many others like Lightroom and Aviar. All of these you can find on Play Store or App Store. Sharing of photos. Okay, after taking your photo, you may want to share your photos, and there are many options of doing so. Some of these include online apps such as Flickr. I used to use Flickr some time back. Flickr is actually a nice site. Picasa, Google Plus, DeviantArt. DeviantArt is awesome. It's for like a lot of media. A lot of media people use it. They share like graphic arts, fonts, a lot of digital stuff around the DeviantArt. It's an awesome site. You should look at that one. And then there's Pinterest. Pinterest is now one of my favorites. It has all sort of images, all sort of interests. You can get photos of many different stuff, high quality, good photos. So yeah, you can share your photos on Pinterest as well. Then we have apps such as Facebook. Ever so popular Facebook. Practically all of us are on Facebook nowadays. And Instagram. Instagram, wow. Instagram is like one of the giants now. Everybody's on Instagram. I think I'm on Instagram like almost every day. I have some wonderful photos on Instagram. Okay, and Hipstamatic. Hipstamatic is also one of the great sites, one of the great apps to use, share your photos, and there are, of course, many others. Okay, moving on. Oh, and I'm using two computers, so sometimes it might take a while for me to transition from one slide to another. And if you're not seeing everything in detail, it's just for now. We're trying to get the hang of this. It's fairly new to us. We're getting there. Here goes my tripod. And folks, if you're buying a tripod, buy a good tripod. Yeah, so that if your tripod falls, you still have it to use. All right. So yeah, we're talking about sharing your photos. Well, these I'm not so familiar with these ones. So you can take a look. We'll be moving on. Okay, we're getting to the good part. Practice shooting. As in shooting with your camera. Practice makes perfect. As I mentioned before, get up, go out there and just practice. Just practice. Shoot, shoot, shoot. The best way for you to learn the limitations of your cell phone camera and improve your cell phone photography is to practice. Take photos in lots of different lighting conditions. Play around with apps and attachments. See just how close you can get to something before it becomes blurry. And try out different methods for keeping your camera as still as possible. There is a lot of variation in cell phone cameras. And while the tips I've provided here apply to most phone cameras, the more practice, the better you'll become. So get out there and practice. It's the only surefire way you will see improvements in your photography. As I was saying, keep practicing and remember, well, for the first half of the video, I was talking about getting close to your subject. You know, once you get too close, your phone will get blurry. Get too far, you won't get to see the detail of the image that you want. So you have to know the limitations of your phone, know how close to get in order to get that perfect photo. And practice to keep your hand as still as possible. Some of us we have the bad practice. Well, some of us might have that control, or we have our phone out like that, and then we'll be like doing that thing where we extend our fingers and just by pressing it, the phone is shaking. Keep your phone steady. Brace your hands. You can even rest it on your chest. Press with your finger. Boom. And you got a wonderful photo right here. And also, you can edit with apps. There's so many apps to use edit your photos. I don't know if this camera, if this camera that I'm using was clear enough, I could just give you an example of that. But I guess I could do that for next week. I'll give you a good example of that. But for now, I'm just kind of giving you the fundamentals of mobile photography. Okay, and that's the end of that slide. And we are moving on to the next. Alright, introduction to digital photography. Right. This presentation will cover some tips and tricks to help make you a better photographer. We will focus mainly on techniques involving digital cameras, which you will learn more about later. But many of these rules also apply to conventional film and video cameras. So basically what you're learning here is not just for phone photography, but also all photography and film and videos as well. Alright, so as I was mentioning before, you need to know your camera. So basically know the limitations, know what your camera can do. As with many pieces or piece of electronic equipment, you may want to take the time to learn how to operate your camera correctly. The first step is reading over the manual. This is important since you want to ensure you are familiar with the basic operations, charging instruction, how to load memory cards, transfer images to your computer, etc. Alright, let me give you an example of that one now. You buy a camera or a phone, you don't understand it, you may end up destroying it even in the first day, because since last week or over the weekend, I heard some friends talking about the best way to break a camera. How, as in, like, your camera is no good, it's just going to be a camera. One of them, his camera is not working properly. What he did was, the camera was on and he took out the memory card. Because of that, it just kind of mess up the camera. The camera can't do nothing at all. Yeah, so you need to read your manuals and understand your device so that you don't do any damage. You can imagine buying a camera that costs $80,000 or even more, 100 and something thousand, and you get it on the first day and take about 5 pictures and say you're going to put it in your load them to your computer, and then you didn't turn it off and you slip out the memory card. You slip it out, bam. Just like that, the camera stopped work. That would be very painful. Yeah, so you need to know your device. Okay, for your first shot, limit the setting you change so that you can get started quickly. Yeah, that's also a good point, because some people, as they get a camera, they want to change everything. They want to go through to make it customized as possible. But then sometimes we kind of change it up too much, and when you start shooting, none of the pictures look like how you want them to look, because they were at pretty standard setting, and then you move it down all the way to something else, and now you're trying to fix it, but you change it so much you can't even get it back to how it was at first. I must admit, I did something like that once. And I was just using the camera. I changed this and I changed that, and I realized that my photos weren't coming out properly. And I mean, it was so tedious getting it back to the correct setting. I mean, I spent so much time shooting, and it's like after every shot, I go back and try and set something, shoot again, go back, try and set something, and then I say, oh gosh, it's frustrating, trust me. Worse if you're going to do something serious like a big event or something important. Yeah, that wouldn't work out at all. On most digital cameras, you adjust setting using the menu that is displayed in the camera's LCD panel. The settings are with written menus, much like computer software. Your camera will also have a control in it, usually at the back of the top, that functions like a four-sided computer mouse, so you can select different settings. Alright, there you have it. That one right there around the OK button. That four directional button. That's the one that it was talking about earlier. There it is. Alright, basic camera features. Most digital SLR cameras have similar basic features, including white balance adjustment, aperture and exposure control, shutter speed control, quality sharpness setting, red eye reduction, macro mode and presets photo modes, video/audio recording capability. Alright, so we begin with white balance. White balance adjusts colors based on the light you are shooting in, whether indoors or outdoors, usually referred to as the color temperature. With proper white balance, white objects in your photo appear as white instead of with an orange or blue cast. Some digital cameras have an auto white balance feature, but be careful as it isn't always accurate. So yeah, the cameras basically come, it's like it works like the phone camera. It does some of the work for you. So if you put it on auto, sometimes you may be in a certain environment and you take a photo, and because it's on auto, and it's not that a big a difference, or it's not that obvious, it might make it a bit too blue or a bit too orange because the camera is trying to do the work for you. As a professional, you'll set this to how you like it, because a professional shooter usually does everything manual, so you wouldn't have your camera in auto. Okay, so you can correct white balance problems on the computer with programs such as Photoshop. So the professional would, after taking a photo, would go to his computer and adjust certain aspects of the photo, such as white balance and many other changes. Yeah, so a professional would use Photoshop or Adobe Lightroom to make these changes. Okay, so here we see an example of incorrect white balance. As you see in this pic, the white is kind of blue. It has a blue hue on it. And for the correct white balance now, it looks a bit, on the right side, you see where it looks more natural. The persons aren't blue and everything around isn't blue. So there's no unusual tinting here. Okay, so we're at aperture exposure control. As you've already learned from your video lessons, a camera's aperture is the opening that allows light into the lens. Think of the iris of the eye. It opens and closes, letting more light, letting less light. Yes, so you're indoors and it's not that lit, it will dilate extend. When you go outside, it will contract, get smaller. That's basically like a camera. Well, I don't know if this one will show. No, it's not showing. But the camera does it as well. By the other lens, if you see the widening of the. Okay. Setting the aperture correctly is important for ensuring properly exposed photos, meaning the correct amount of light. A large aperture setting lets in more light and is useful in more darkly lit situations. A small aperture setting is better suited for brightly lit scenes. So if you're outside and trying to take the sky and the sun is out bright, you'd have to reduce your aperture to let in less light. Most digital cameras feature an auto exposure setting that automatically adjusts the aperture as lighting conditions change. You can see those dials up here. So they have the auto, manual, shutter speed, priority, programming. So there are a lot of presets up here on a digital camera. Aperture and exposure control continued. Professional photographers rarely use auto exposure mode. As I was mentioning before, they prefer instead to control the aperture settings themselves. Yeah, a professional photographer won't leave certain judgment to their camera because the camera will not always get it right. They just kind of set a pretty standard setting, but in certain conditions it wouldn't know what to do, so you wouldn't get an accurate lighting or an accurate photo. Different aperture settings are referred to as f-stops. The smaller the f-stop number, the larger the aperture opening. Yes, this is a little confusing. Yeah, it is confusing at first. Took me a while to get it. So yeah, the smaller the f-stop number, so it's like in reverse. This is the camera lens. Right now it's open and it's at 1.2. Closes, the more it closes, the number gets wider, moves up to about a 5. So the wider, the lower the number, smaller, the higher the number. Underexposed, not enough light, appears too dark. You ever take a photo and it looks so dark? That is what photographers refers to as underexposed. Overexposed, too much light. You take a photo and there's so much light in it you can barely see. Excuse me. You can barely see what you're taking. That means it's overexposed. Here we have examples of underexposed and overexposed. So on the left, from the left going to the right, well, the underexposed is on the left, overexposed is on the right. So you want to be somewhere in the middle with the correct exposure. Brightness is reduced as light passes through the aperture of a camera lens. And here we see the aperture settings. This example is showing from f-stop, that's a 2.8 to f22. So the 2.8 would let in more light, while going to the 22 letting less light. So basically it's showing you how the rings open and closes. So it opens, give you more light, closes, less light. Depth of field, one of my favorite. The camera's aperture setting also controls the depth of field of your photo. Depth of field is the range of distance from the camera lens that appears in sharp focus. The smaller the aperture open or the higher the f-stop number, the greater the depth of field or larger range of focus. The larger the aperture opening or smaller f-stop number, the shallower the depth of field and small range of focus. Alright, here we see some example. On the left, you see where it's f-stop 22 and it's really out of focus there. F8, it's finally getting into focus. You notice a blur in the background. The F2, the person are clearer and the background is fully blurred out. So it's showing more depth, showing more deepness and bringing the subject into focus more. There's a next example of the depth of field. So here we have the setup of the table at the front here is in focus, and the farther it goes, it gets more blurry. It gets more shallow. So in this photo, the focus is right there in the middle. As you see in the example on the right. Some more examples of depth of field. With the fence, it's showing the depth in the middle. The focus is in the middle. With the chessboard, the focus is in the front. So at the top we have a deep depth of field. So it's very deep now, in which focus is at the front and everything in the back is blurred. In the shallow depth of field, there's some amount of detail in the back and the focus is in the front. Shutter speed. A camera's shutter speed refers to the length of time the shutter stays open, allowing light to enter the camera. The faster the shutter speed, the less light that enters the camera and the quicker the image is captured. A good photographer knows how to make aperture settings and shutter speed work together. As with exposure setting, most digital cameras have auto shutter modes. You should be aware of how different shutter speeds affect an image. Yes, so the shutter speed is also one of my favorites because I use this to do a lot of photos. Especially when we're dealing with moving objects, the faster the shutter speed, the best you can capture them in movement. It shows movement. You won't get a blurry photo. And also, with a quicker shutter speed, it lets in less light. So if you're outside and it's bright, you can turn up your shutter speed in order to get a clear image. Here are some examples of the shutter speed. So we have from 1 second to 1,000th of a second. So the larger the number, the faster the speed, the less light, the more dark it is. Longer the exposure, such as 1 second, give you much more light to the film that at 1,000th of a second, more than a 1,000th of a second exposure. Shutter speed also needs to be adjusted depending on the type of subject being photographed. Fast-moving subjects require a fast shutter speed, such as 1/500 of a second. A sport, such as used in sports or action shots. For shutter speeds lower than 1/25 of 1/25, you should use a tripod, or the image will look blurry. So yes, when you're shooting at slow shutter speeds, you need to have a tripod, because there's no way you can hold your hand stable enough to get that image in full focus. It will be blurry. Okay, so for some more on shutter speeds, in this image, we see where we're using fast and slow shutter speed. So fast shutter speed, all right, so this one, the one on the left has fast shutter image motion is frozen in time. So sometimes you see water splashes, a photo with water splash, they use a fast shutter speed to catch the water in mid motion. While slow shutter speed image is blurred. So they slow down the shutter speed for the one on the right, and you see it looks kind of misty, kind of smoky, because it's blurred. It's not really focused. You don't see that much detail. In this photo now, there's a man. He's in motion, and they're using a slow shutter speed. So the background is blurred. The camera moves along with the man as he rides. An example of this is, so the man is riding. I'm at a slow shutter speed. What I do, I move along with the man with the camera. So the man is in focus while his background is blurred out. I spoke about line painting earlier, using light to paint a picture. All right, this one is an example of that. So this person has a long shutter speed, so it acts like it records the light trails as the vehicles move along the road. You can try to do this with your phones. You can just turn up your shutter speed. Well, it's kind of technical. I'll explain some more further though. All right, so in this photo we have a slow shutter speed. Note the blurred motion. So because it has a slow shutter speed, that little boy is moving, so it looks quite blurred. The one on the right is at a fast shutter speed, so he freezes in motion. There's no blur there, and there's also a deep depth of field. You notice the background is isolated. Composition tips. Your initial impulse may be to use the camera LCD monitor instead of the viewfinder to compose pictures. You can do this, but this technique can also result in soft focus image. Holding a lightweight camera away from your body is an invitation for motion blur. Holding the viewfinder to your eye provides built-in stabilization that helps ensure sharp images. To stabilize the camera, hold it with one hand and support it with the other. Keep your elbows close at your side. Stand with your feet shoulder width apart to steady the camera. Get close to your subject when possible. I said that before. This eliminates potential distracting background details and focuses attention on your subject. Pay attention to the background. Use the rule of third, avoid placing objects dead center. This helps to create visual interest. Alright, rule of thirds, we'll go in more in detail. It's one of the foundations to composition. It's one of the widely used compositions. Try to take shots from interesting angles. Force people to see things in unique ways. So when you're taking photos, try to do it different. Don't try to be like everybody else. You want to get them to see what you see or what you're thinking. These photos are done in rule of thirds. Could anyone attempt to tell me where anyone here knows about the rule of thirds, by the way? Anyone? Not hearing anything, so moving along. We have, okay, let me go back to the rule of thirds. All right, so with the rule of thirds, there are 3 sections on a photo. You have one on this side, one in the middle, and one on the right. So when the subject falls on one of these lines, one here, that's the image is on one of the thirds. So there's 2 lines going down, one going down here, one going down here, and then there's one going across here and one going across here. Any intersection, once the subject is there, is on the third. In this photo, the flag is on one of the thirds. This one, the swimmer is on one of the thirds. This one, the man's eye is in one of the thirds. The gun is also in one of the thirds. Okay, we have leading lines. Leading lines draws the attention towards the subject. Here we have the blackboard. It leads towards the boy. We have the building around the back with the lines leading towards the men, or even these wheels here leading towards the men. Here we have fire leading towards the cross. So we have leading lines and repetition. So here is the repetition here. There's a lot of repetition in the first photo. So we have, in these, we have rule of thirds, leading lines, and repetition. and also shutter speed because you see the motion blurred. Oh, excuse me for a bit. All right. Okay, so we shall be concluding here for today, and we'll come back next week. We'll come back next week to continue. And also, I'd like for you to go and take some photos with your phone and hopefully share them within the class next week. I'll share mine as well. So if you have a good enough photo or the best photo, I may be even giving out a prize to one of our lucky class participants. So please come out next week and participate. And thank you for having me. My name is Nikhil Campbell, and have a wonderful day.